Hello everyone, I'm Barb Owen of HowToGetCreative.com, and I want to thank you for joining me today on another episode of Tips and Tricks. This week over on the blog at How to Get Creative, I wrote a blog post about working with metal and taking kid-inspired art and translating it into a metal pendant. Now that particular technique requires the use of some metalworking tools, and I thought, well, what if you didn't have those tools commonly available in your home or your craft space or your studio, and you wanted to do some things with metal? How could you do that simply and easily? So I thought I'd give you a little tour of a few things that might even surprise you about things you might use. So here's a few things that you can get that are commercially produced from the Vintaj company. These are they're like charm packs, and they come in different finishes. They're brass with different kinds of finishes on them. This is a package of hearts. This is a package of artisan copper, just little shapes, different charm type shapes. Most of them have a hole, at least one hole drilled in them, so that you can attach them to charm bracelets, or you can make necklaces or whatever else you might want to do with them. And then you can also get these beautiful little folders. They're embossing folders from Sizzix, and they're actually metal. And they are made to put these charms, these metal charms, in these embossing folders and run them through your embossing machine or your die cutting machine. So that's exactly what I've done with this little heart. This is the same thing that you see in the package here, although it looks different. And I'm going to show you, give you a close-up shot so you can see what this looks like. So this little embossing folder is called Woodland Birds, and that's what I've been able to capture. And you can tell by the size of my hand how tiny this little heart is and how well that shows up. So the way that you get that to show up is after it's been embossed, then you use their reliefing block, which is like a little sanding sponge or sanding block, and you rub that over the top, and it takes some of the finish off the high spots, and so you get the relief showing from the embossing. So that is fun to do. This is the same kind of thing. This is a disc and with the other finish, and this one was embossed through DecoEmboss is the name of the little embossing folder, and you can see it has a very different, almost an aged, kind of almost a pitted look in the metal, which is really fun. Now, neither one of these have had any color treatment done to them. They're just simply embossed and then reliefed with the reliefing block. There are paints that they have called patina, and these patina paints are specifically made for metal. They are opaque in nature as opposed to alcohol inks, which are very translucent in nature. And I'll show you a little bit more about the patina paints in a minute. Also, from the Vintaj company, you can get these metal foil sheets that are adhesive backed, and you can see on the back this white surface. That's the paper, protective paper that's protecting the adhesive, and these come in ATC size, which is 2.5 by 3.5 inches, and it's just convenient, very convenient, because you just peel off the back and you could stick it on to either a metal charm of some kind that you want to, do the embossing on, or in my case, I took that off and I applied it to cardstock, or in this case, it was cereal box, sorry. And it's nice, it's easy, it's convenient because the sticky is already there. You don't have to worry about how you're going to glue metal to something else, and so you just stick it down. And then I embossed this right through my embossing machine, and then I hit the high spots with some Inka Gold metallic rub. I used a couple of different colors in orange and turquoise to hit the high spots, and then around the outside edge I just put some black acrylic ink, and so it's ready to add a charm or add something else to it and use it as an ATC, or I can cut it up and use bits and pieces of it too. Here's another piece, same exact thing. See, there's the cracker box. This is the embossing folder I use. This one happens to be retro circles. And I don't have to use it exactly as it came out of the machine. I've done nothing to this. I haven't painted it with any of the patina paints. I haven't used Inka Gold or anything. This is exactly how it came out of the machine. I can cut it up into smaller pieces to use for other projects. whatever I like to do. Another thing that is really fun to use is electrical duct or silver colored duct tape. Now this is commonly used. It's a little unwieldy. It's not cooperating very well here. This is commonly used for sticking sections of dryer venting and things like that together. And it comes in a couple different widths. This one, the wider one, is a little less than 3 inches. It's about 2 7/8 inches wide, and the narrow one is about 1 7/8 inches wide. Now, this is real sticky stuff. So it has a paper backing on it, has a very strong adhesive on it. So when you peel that off, when you peel that backing off, you want to know where it's going to stick because it's sticky. So what I did on this piece is I took a piece of black cardstock. I just took sections of I used the wide tape. It could have been either one. And I stuck it all down. I'm going to give you a close shot of this so you can see what I'm talking about. So I made kind of like a patchwork quilt. And I just stuck pieces onto the black cardstock. And then to create the patterning for this, I use something that you find in a drugstore or a discount store, and it's an orange stick. And this is meant to do things to your fingernails, push your cuticles back and so forth and so on. It's called an orange stick. Easy to find, easy to use, and it's not expensive, and it gives you some great texture. And so everything on here is just a matter of doodling. Whoops, sorry, got a little, that tape is really shiny, so it's really flashing out here. But you can get some great texture just by using an orange stick. Then when I was finished with the texturing, what I used to color it with were some distress paints. So I just used some distress paints and a little sponge, makeup sponge, and I just dabbed it on. Sprayed it with some water. I wanted to see what that would do because the distress paints, I understand, were supposed to stick to the metal. I thought, well, but it was destroying all my doodly work that I had put in there, and I'm like, well, I want to see that. So I sprayed it with some water, and I started playing with a paper towel and taking some of it back off. I got some great spotty effects on it, but the paint stuck down into the grooves that were left behind by using my orange stick, where I was doing all the doodling and some Zentangle kinds of patterns and so forth. And so it sunk, the paint sunk right down into the depressions and those little areas, and it was great. So this is ready to cut up, and maybe, or I could even use this and but just cut different shapes and so forth and use it for cards or bookmarks or ATCs, or I don't know. I love having pieces like this around because then I get inspired by the different things that I've created, and I am constantly going back to my own things that I've already done and using them for things that, you know, for projects and things that I never planned them for. And so I love doing that because it's just great to have your own stuff all ready to use. The next thing I want to talk to you about is this craft metal, that craft foil that's available. You can get this at lots of different places. It's a thin metal. This happens to be 40 gauge, and it is great. This is copper, and it's wonderful. I don't know the yardage that comes with it, but you get a lot of metal in these packages. And I'll have more information about that in the description box. But what I did with this, this is meant for copper tooling and that kind of thing. I don't do a lot of copper tooling, and so what I do use is I like it attached to cardstock so that I can have options for what to do with it, because the cardstock helps to thicken it up a little bit. So I glued this to the cardstock, and this was the glue that I chose to use, which is Crafter's Pick, the Ultimate Glue. And this is a good glue for gluing something that is non-porous to something that's non-porous to something that is porous, like the metal to the cardstock. So I put a nice thin coat of glue, put the metal on there, put it under some heavy books, and let it sit for, oh, I don't know, probably close to 24 hours actually. And then what I did is I cut a chunk out, and I used another one of the little Sizzix metal embossing folders. This one happens to be butterfly swirls. That is almost a tongue twister, I'm telling you. So I put it in here like so, and then I embossed it through my embossing die cutting machine. And now it's ready to do whatever I want to do with this. And I'll probably cut this into pieces, and actually on the live stream on Friday you'll probably see me use some of this. So you'll find the link to the live stream show in the description box below. I'd love to have you join me, and you can chat with us live and ask questions and all of that in real time. Another thing that you can do with this, these are the plastic embossing folders. This one is Checkerboard by Sizzix, and what I did on this one, it's the same exact stuff. It's the black cardstock with the metal glued onto it, is I used some Archival ink and I rubbed it over the surface, and this one happened to be library green, rubbed it over the surface of my embossing folder, put the tape in, or the metal part, the copper part, down against the embossing folder, ran it through my embossing machine, and when it came out, it looked like this. So this is what it looked like, and you can see in the background, I think, in the depressed areas, you can see that it's a different color, and that's from the ink. It would be real tough to get in there later and try to colorize those little perfect squares, but it worked great by using the embossing folder. Then just make sure that you clean this really well, clean it off your folder really well, and then after this sat for a few minutes, then I went back and I buffed it using a paper towel, and I took off, you know, some of the ink did come off, but not all the ink came off, and so you can see that interesting look that you get by inking the embossing folder and then texturizing the metal. So that was fun to do. And one more thing, actually I have two more things to show you. We'll talk about this one next because this is a similar process to the copper. This is, surprisingly, this is plain old aluminum foil from the kitchen. And I did exactly the same thing I did with the copper sheet. I glued it down to black cardstock, and I used the Crafter's Pick, the ultimate glue, put a nice thin coat, smooth the aluminum foil into it, and you'll see you get lovely texture, which is really nice. It's not ever going to go, I don't think it's possible, because aluminum foil is so thin, I don't think it's possible to get all the wrinkles out. So you just work with the wrinkles. Embrace the wrinkles, people. That's what you got to do. So once it was rolled, smoothed out and burnished down so the two had good adhesion, then I put it under some heavy books and some weights and just let it sit until it was dry. From there, I took, right in here you'll see, I took these patina paints. Actually, the first thing I did was I took a stencil, and this is the stencil that I used. Could be any stencil, but I wanted one with a kind of a large motif for this area. So what I did was I took this bird and I put it right on my sheet, my larger sheet. So I was not working on a big sheet. And then I used one of these Martha Stewart Stylus tools, and then I just went right around following the stencil. So I had my pattern for my bird on there. And then what I used after that was I used different kinds of texture tools. So this is a rolling texture tool. It's got one design on one end, had another design like a little teeny, let's see, what do you call it? Like a fluting kind of tool on the other end. I think it came with one more tool in it. And I textured the bird and I textured the background. And so that was all done first. And then the next thing that I did after that was I took my patina paints, the Vintaj Patina paints. So I'm trying to get this where you can get my hands out of the way because it's not very big. We'll get it here in a second. Here we go. So I used the Vintaj Patina paints in several colors This was one of them that I used. This one was Verdigris. So I used several colors and I just painted them on the background and also inside the bird. And then once that was dry, then I went back and used some Inka Gold in a couple of different colors and some of the Inka Golds, and I just used the metallic rub, and you can see how it's picked up some of the texture, because that's what I was trying to do, was highlight the texture, and then around the edge when I was all finished I just inked it with some black Archival ink. So that's another little way that you can use something unexpected. It's just aluminum foil and just some simple tools, nothing fancy. It was a stencil and some texture tools using the little texture tools that are on a wheel, or your styluses. And then you've got a little ATC that you can enclose within a card or a gift or what have you. Now here is the same exact thing, the aluminum foil on cardstock cut out. I just cut out a piece just for an example, and a plastic embossing folder. This happens to be patchwork, and I put it in here and ran it through, and then you get a lovely texture. This has had nothing else done to it, but it textures great, embosses well. You get a beautiful color, and because aluminum foil, the kitchen foil, is shiny on one side and dull on the other, you have two choices for using that as an art material, which is kind of fun too. And the last thing I'm going to show you is recycling. It's a recycle technique, and that is using soft drink cans. And that is what this is. It's a soft drink can, and I cut it apart. You have to be careful when you cut this so that it doesn't cut you, so just be careful. And then you can emboss it through the embossing folders like this. I'll show you that, more of that in just a second. It also will run through your die cutting machines, and a friend of mine made this card and sent to me. Here, and she enclosed an extra leaf. So this is a leaf that had been die cut and embossed, and you can see that it's the can. And then she colored it with alcohol ink, so it's a beautiful lightweight embellishment. So it's nice because it'll go through the mail and doesn't add a lot of weight. Then I took two pieces of the soft drink can and I glued them together. Now I will tell you, it was a little challenging to get those two pieces of metal to stick together, but I was determined. So I tried a couple of different glues, finally got them to stick together, put them under weight. But part of what you have is that the soft drink can wants to move away from each other because they're curled, you know, they're curved. Because you can see it right here, see that how it's curved. So when you're trying to put the two pieces with the inside curve to inside curve, it doesn't like to conform to that. So you have to be determined. But I wanted to have the back side the same plain, you know, not the soft drink writing on the back. And I wanted it to be a little heavier. So anyway, in the end, it worked. And then I took, and this is a piece of kid-inspired art. If you look at the blog this week, the blog post, you'll recognize that shape. And I put it inside my embossing folder and ran it through, got some great texture out of it, super texture, and then again painted using the Vintaj Patina paints. When I was all finished, I used some of the Inka Golds to catch some of the highlights on it, and so now it's ready to turn into a charm or to put on a bookmark. I love making bookmarks. It's ready to do that. It's ready to do all different kinds of things, you know, whatever I want to do with it. So that should give you some ideas for using some different kinds of metal things that maybe you hadn't thought about before, and it should be you know, get those old brain waves going. So thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Tips and Tricks. I hope you'll go out and get creative today, because you know, after all, it's easy. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.